Senator Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I move the Senate take note of document number 7, or documents number 7, to be more accurate. These documents are in response to an order of the Senate moved by my Greens colleague Senator Rice back in November last year, requiring the tabling of the master facility agreements between relevant state and territory governments, the Commonwealth Government and the NAIF, or the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility, to give it its full name. It's good to see the government, at least in this case, complying with an order of the Senate, which is becoming more and more uncommon, so acknowledge and appreciate that. The agreement, it's worth noting the agreement, master facility agreement between the State of Queensland, that is the Palaszczuk Labor Government, Commonwealth and the NAIF, occurred back in April of 2017, the 3rd of April, as did the one with the Northern Territory. The final one was between the State of Western Australia, which didn't occur till the 2nd of November, and it took until that was provided, and indeed an order of the Senate some weeks later, before we actually were able to see these documents. And certainly I would say, as a representative of the Greens and also as a representative of the State of Queensland, that this is just another example of the lack of transparency surrounding the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility. I'm just recently, as people would know, back in the Senate and now back on following the current Senate inquiry into the governance and operations of the Northern Australian Infrastructure Facility, and which had hearings just last week in Cairns and in Darwin. I was only able to attend via phone for part of the Darwin one. My colleague Senator Rice filled in for the other part of it. And without preempting the findings of that committee, which still got to consider all of the evidence, a very consistent theme from many of the submissions and the witnesses has been around the lack of transparency. And even just last week in the hearings in Cairns, we had the strange situation of the Queensland Government, who put in the Queensland Labor Government, who did put in a written submission, then not appearing at that hearing, and it's a matter for the committee as to what we do going forward, but to not have that opportunity at a hearing in Queensland to hear from the Queensland Government, when everybody knows there is enormous public interest and valid public interest, not just political wrangling of the day, but valid public interest. This is a huge amount of money, $5 billion, that's being made available to assist in infrastructure development in Northern Australia. And certainly, speaking on behalf of Queensland, I could say there is valuable and important opportunities for investment in sustainable infrastructure that assists community in Northern Queensland. We heard a representative, for example, from the tourism industry in Cairns talking about just how crucial tourism jobs are to all of Queensland, certainly to the northern part of that state. It is a major employer, and it is an employer that generates long-term, ongoing, sustainable jobs, not boom-bust jobs. And it was clear, certainly from the evidence to date, and looking through some of these master facility agreements, that we have a real problem with a bias towards mega projects, and the obvious one that has got so much attention is rail links to open up the Galilee Basin and new thermal coal deposits there, the Adani mine being the one, of course, the Adani Carmichael mine that's got all of the attention. And we had the very unfortunate situation, the Senate committee hearing, when, as everybody, all of us would know, you only get limited time to hear from a witness, and the first part of the questioning of the NAIF representatives themselves was just about the status of the Horizon project, application for funding. Have they put one in? Have they not? Is it active? Is it inactive? What does inactive mean? All of that's currently a bit of argy-bargy between the State Labor Government and NAIF. Frankly, what would be much simpler from the point of view of all of us following this was if the State Labor Government just said, we're not going to support, we will veto anything that is public funds used to assist the opening up of new coal mines in the Galilee Basin. It wouldn't matter what the status of Horizon's application was, because they would know, as we now know, thanks to the Queensland Government's appropriate, although very belated, decision to veto Adani's application for a rail line. that does stop funding. The federal government has confirmed that. So we need transparency from all sides, frankly, and clarity about the position of the Queensland government in regard to the opening up of coal deposits in the Galilee Basin. What the Greens would like to see is much greater transparency across the board. We're pleased that we now finally have these master facility agreements tabled, can be properly scrutinised, but there is an ongoing need for much wider transparency simply about the impacts.
Thank you, Senator